It's Wednesday, 5 July, in the year of our Lord, 2023. I want to thank Bright Natalie and the team. Just an incredible hour. We're picking up hour two. And very honored, I want to go to Dr. Naomi Wolf. Dr. Wolf, first off, I've been inundated with members of the War and Posse that have been asking, what's the situation with your health? Can you give us a thorough update on what happened and where are we in your recovery before we get into the business in front of us? Because you're one of the warriors on the tip of the spear, and we cannot lose you at this current moment in the nation's history.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I mean, all of you out there in Posse Land, and you, Steve, for asking. Well, as my latest essay is titled, Not Dead Yet, it was, I've been, as many of you know, very, very, very ill, hospitalized for 2.5 weeks. I won't go into the details, but it was a very close call. And I did ask the Posse, or I think my husband asked the Posse and everyone for prayers, and I got them by the thousands and tens of thousands and just immense numbers. And I'm sure it helped because it was a very close call, but every day I'm getting stronger. And I'm just so happy to be here with all of you again. I feel like I have a second chance, and I'll make the most of it. And I'm just super grateful for being alive and all of you, and for the chance to keep fighting.
What's ironic about it and quite powerful and moving, I mean, you've kind of shifted over the last couple of years and very much focused on this area of the nation's health and individuals' health, and really the government's either responsibility for helping that, or in some cases just having other narratives and other actions. So it's very ironic. I think now, obviously you cherished your health before, but you realize that your health is everything. If you don't have your health, the whole world changes, and you just focus on that. It's just you're out of it, and that's what I think is so important for you, not only to be healthy, but back in the game. You are on offense. Your team is on offense. I want to talk about that first, and then we got to talk about our favorite, Dr. Walensky's farewell address to the nation. Didn't quite rise to either Eisenhower or General Washington's, but in her mind it did. Let's go. First off, you guys are on offense. Tell us about it.
Sure. And just in relation to what you just said, Steve, it is kind of a miracle how life comes around. Like, I've always been careful about my health and cared about it. But in being ejected from kind of elite society, I have such a gift because I'm being cared for by people like Dr. Ely, Dr. McCullough, the best of the kind of alternative dissident doctors network. And they helped me survive. And I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't kind of stood up a little bit 2.5 years ago to try to save other people from terrible things happening to them, especially women and babies. So it's a giant karmic circle. And I do feel very fortunate. And I think all of us are lucky to have those dissident doctors creating a completely alternative, fact-based healthcare system. Now we're in kind of
this leads into going on offense your letter, but just think about that concept. You're talking about some of the most reputable people in the nation. This morning show, we had Dr. Miriam Grossman, who's a world-renowned child psychiatrist that is like given the warning in this whole transgender thing. I mean, she's out there, but at one time, now she's being attacked viciously by everybody. It's what you just said, dissonant doctors. These are people that are some of the most prominent people in their field. And just in 24, 36 months, all of a sudden you're talking about, or their dissidents, they have to stand up to fact-based science. And it's absolute insanity what's going on in the country and the world. And there's something deeper at work here, you can tell, because it just didn't all of a sudden appear out of nowhere. Dr. Wolf.
Well, that's very true. But, then we get into some very deep rabbit holes. I mean, it's obvious to me that institutions that we believed in for decades have collapsed, and the basis of their credibility has collapsed, and that there's some gigantic, I would say, spiritual upheaval, while everything that isn't based on truth and service to humanity is falling apart or losing its gravitas, and new institutions are kind of arising, new heroes are arising, a new America is arising. It's not over yet, but, the last 3 years, we've all been fighting for it. And I think we're seeing the results now. Yesterday was the 4th of July, and they didn't kill us. They didn't wipe out, the nation, right? These evildoers have been trying to murder our republic for 3 years, and they haven't succeeded. There's still important decisions like the one we're going to be discussing, where judges said, hey, no, wait a minute, the First Amendment means something. There's still people celebrating this country from coast to coast and reminding and teaching their children what freedom means. It's a time of extraordinary revolution. And I do think it's like 1776 in the sense that, yes, there are material battles, there's political battles, but I think that was also a time of incredible spiritual combat. And here we are again.
In part of this combat is the manifestations in the physical realm. Talk to us about you going in offense. And that's the whole thing, is that we're not playing defense here. We're actually playing offense. Tell us about it.
Yes. Well, as all of you know, we have two legal teams battling Pfizer and the Biden administration for their assault on humanity through this mRNA injection. And George Smith in Ohio, all of you know, he's moved ahead with his 10 plaintiffs. And I can tell you all the DOJ has responded to his letter. I can update you that far, but also we have very big news with the LA-based team, Scott Street and John Howard. Their letter has now gone into the DOJ accusing Pfizer of fraud and FOIA-ing communications, early emails from the federal government in relationship to Pfizer, and using as a basis of their letter asserting fraud the work that your 3,500 volunteers, our 3,500 volunteers have done, disclosing that Pfizer did things like conceal an 87% spontaneous abortion and miscarriage rate in one section of the Pfizer documents, hire 2,700 full-time staffers to deal with the flood of adverse events they were receiving, and so on. That is finally in a legal letter that went to DOJ.
So that's what I want to make sure everybody understands, because of all the laborious going through the Pfizer documents that just miraculously a federal judge said, no, we're not going to let those be withheld, kept from the public for 75 years. We're going to put it out. The team, A Daily Clout, and the Warren Posse put together now, I guess, over years of research, you're finally getting to the point where you can take that research and off of Pfizer's documents. Remember, this is not conspiracy theory because it's their information. Putting it together in these various reports, and I think you're up to 74 reports now,
Correct.
That lawyers feel confident enough they actually could go to DOJ. And the specific complaint is, if you look at the body of evidence in Pfizer's own research, that it's fraud that they perpetuated upon the American people?
Well, as I understand this letter, I really admire what Scott Street and John Howard have done. They're making the case that that Pfizer committed fraud against the federal government in contracting and did concealed information, manipulated information in securing the support of the federal government. So I'm not a lawyer, but I think that that's the opening salvo in getting FOIA communications that will give us more clarity on what those initial conversations were like, in which Pfizer was saying to the federal government, it's safe and effective. It's 95% effective, presumably, right? We know they did, and we know from the Pfizer documents, especially Report 74, that that was a lie. And then we'll see the federal government's response. But I think it's very strategically clever because it drives a wedge between the federal government and Pfizer and puts pressure on the federal government to show that they didn't collude in defrauding the American people, essentially.
I want to connect some dots here from what you said. The collapse of our institutions and this issue of that Pfizer actually, as a contractor, defraud the federal government. It gets us to Dr. Walensky and her farewell address to the nation.
Yes.
I purposely brought up General Eisenhower and General Washington, who gave quite profound addresses. General Washington gave it to his staff at Fraunces Tavern at the end of the Revolution, into talking about what the revolution really was about. And then Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex at the end of his presidency. Her, she wanted it to be like that. It's like this profundity that she's going to come out now and give us this whole, not even a pep talk, deeper than that, but to try to reinforce, because I think they understand internally that the institutions are also collapsing around them. Dr. Wolf, your assessment of Walensky's farewell address to the nation.
I mean, it's really extraordinary, this woman's kind of princessy insularity and the things she says that reveal that she's been kind of cosseted from any sort of accountability. She seems completely astonished that anyone is mad at her. And she seems, this is my favorite, quote, this is from Associated Press, which, by the way, has an MOU with Xinhua and other major ties to the pharmaceutical industry in addition. Quote, I never expected that when I am trying to run to be an aid to somebody, that they would actually be turned off by my very existence, Walensky added. This is her takeaway after putting a faulty, murderous, sterilizing injection into 600 and I mean, she's boasting 678 million injections. I don't even know how she gets that math. And it's killing people, and athletes are dropping dead, and people are having strokes and gigantic blood clots and weird things in embalmed bodies. And she's like, oh my God, I can't believe people don't like me. You know, that they're like, here I am trying to help. She's completely divorced from reality. And, you know, the other thing that's kind of predictable.
But hang on. But she actually says a quiet part out loud. She understands that people are turned off by her very existence. That happens to be a fact, correct? Because of what she's done. That you understand, it's actually, the message has actually gotten down to her core being. That's why she gives the farewell address. That's what I find so extraordinary about this. Am I wrong in that? Because she kind of said, we are turned off by your very existence because of what you've done to the country, particularly when you were in an institution that at one point in time was revered and looked at as someone that would guide the nation to better health.
Well, I mean, you're making a really good point. I'd really love to know what led her, what experiences she's had recently that have led her to whine like that. I mean, it's a very kind of...
Hold it. Let me hold it. I tell you one, because remember, they have Grabian. So they do the clips every night. Her communication staff giving her, I'm going to throw out a random thing, Dr. Naomi Wolf on War Room, hammering her. I think she's watched that clip a couple of times. Her staff says, look what these madmen are saying about you, right? That's what she's watched. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And that and many more. There's so many other great shows on that are also, reemphasizing and becoming force multipliers on this point. Because we have a problem not with her as a person, maybe later with how she's comported herself and done this, but what she did as an official in an institution that at one time was revered throughout the world. Not as a taxpayer funded, we pay for it, but was a revered institution, and it probably more than any other, right? Even more than maybe Fauci's institution, not Fauci himself, or even FDA. As an institution, CDC was probably the prime mover of so much misinformation on what went wrong in this pandemic, ma'am.
Well, absolutely. I mean, honestly, as a woman and as a feminist, I'm so mortified when I see her reverting to, high school locker room, why don't people like me, whining and tears after murdering a bunch of people and destroying a revered agency that used to keep us safe. I mean, now that she's done with her catastrophic 2.5 years, I believe 22% of Americans don't trust guidance from the CDC, which is actually a very dangerous situation if we ever actually have a real public health emergency. And not only that, let's not forget the high points of Dr. Walensky's tenure. There was the interview, and again, like, I come from this world, so I get it, right? There she is at her, I think it was an alma mater, a kind of event, these private events, you're somewhere beautiful, there's lots of, tea or rosé, and so she thinks it's a sympathetic audience. Someone's recording, and she says, well, of course, when we found out listening to CNN that it was 95% effective, we were just all so happy because we just wanted to believe this would be our ticket out. This is a woman who's being paid a big salary to run a giant agency at what they claim is a critical moment in our nation's history in terms of public health. And she's just confiding, like, she's among her best friends, that she got her information about the 95% effectiveness from CNN. Now you and I and the posse know from the work of the War Room Daily Clout volunteers that the 95% effective number was arrived at by dropping 200 infected, vaccinated people from the tally. It was a fake number to start with, and presumably Rochelle Walensky knows this. I mean, that's one of the things that I hope will be disclosed in the process of the FOIA that our legal team is doing. What did the federal government know, and when did they know it? But she just kind of astonishingly, it's almost like Marie Antoinette, on the way to the guillotine. I mean, I say that metaphorically. It's a peaceful metaphor. I don't really mean it, violent. I don't mean it as a violent thing. It's a metaphor. But she's just got this bubble of, and I recognize it coming from that same world. I must be a nice person because I'm a member of the elite, and, they must be nice people because we all went to Princeton or Harvard or, we're at Mass General. And so I can't have murdered a bunch of people. I can't have been responsible for destroying the credibility of a massive organization. It's surreal, but you're right. That quote where she says, I can't believe that people would actually think, I'm rushing to help them and they're turned off by my very existence. Respectfully, I don't think she's bothered by my thinking that she's an embodiment of evil on earth. I'm just one person, and we're easy to dismiss.
No. I disagree. I disagree. I think she knows that when you come on this platform and others and the work you're doing, it resonates. Trust me, because she understands that you're a serious person and have gravitas. This is not just somebody screaming over their lunch pail. Let me ask you on information. I don't want to call it warfare, but just information, maybe conflict or narratives, as you're a professional in this area. Is it Fauci and Hotez and Walensky? Are they so dug in? Have they gone so far into safe and effective, the mantra in the implications of what happened with the children, particularly, that they can't? That what we're seeing is they can't backtrack from that. There's no path out, right? They crossed that Rubicon and went on and drove it hard. So they own it, and they're going to go down owning it. Is that where we are in this part of this really conflict that's going on right now?
Well, it is definitely still information warfare. For instance, I was, both astonished and unsurprised to see that the AP story still referred to her accomplishment of rolling out life-saving vaccines after all the work we've done, after all the evidence we've laid out, and other people as well. These institutions who are bought in have to stick to that to the very end, and so do the murderers, right? They have to, and I'm sure they've had legal advice that if you say anything that sounds like an apology or an acknowledgement, that's an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and that can be used against you. So it is kind of a long, drawn-out information struggle that is also a death struggle. I mean, it is a struggle to the death, because there will be a tipping point, right? And just like this decision by this judge that the AGs of Louisiana.
But I want to tee this up. This is not Naomi Wolf theorizing. This is not Steve Bannon, teeing her up. This gets to the facts as laid out by a federal judge and telling people this is not going to go long. This is not going to happen any longer. And we had Darren Beatty on the show this morning. What's in this opinion is shocking and stunning. and backs up your point. Walk through how that plays in. What Eric Schmidt, now a U.S. Senator who was Attorney General at the time, this happened in Missouri, in Louisiana. This is where we got the deposition of Fauci and all that. Tell us about what the federal judges ruled and the facts as presented in this ruling, Dr. Wolf, because it's nothing short of jaw-dropping and 1,000% supports what you've been saying for the last couple of years.
Thank you. It's a very, very big deal. Mine is one of the tweets that is part of the body of evidence in this case. And the wonderful Janine Eunice, who's a friend of mine, who at that time was at NCLA, helped to bring this case. And our friends, Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Kuldorf, who were maligned by Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins for telling the truth, they're also part of this case. So this is one of those truly historic cases. It's going to go into the history books. And it's, if it had gone the other way, that would have been a big milestone in losing our republic. And the fact that this judge, Terry Doughty, a Trump appointee, made a preliminary injunction. I'm now looking at the Washington Examiner. The court has granted our motion to block top officials in the federal government from violating the First Amendment rights of millions of Americans. Missouri AG Andrew Bailey tweeted, "What a way to celebrate Independence Day." So to explain to everyone what this means and why it's so important, when I got this, information yesterday, I was so overjoyed, and it is such a poetic and beautiful way to celebrate the 4th of July. Basically, as many of you know, the Biden administration colluded with Facebook and Twitter and DHS and the Department of the Census and CDC to comb through the profiles and tweets and posts of American citizens, including, as you know, me, and then they colluded and put pressure on big tech to censor American citizens and to censor First Amendment protected speech. So just to remind everyone what the law says, a private company can do whatever they want to censor people, but the government, the US government, cannot collude with private industry and violate the First Amendment rights of American citizens. That is completely illegal and unconstitutional. So the Biden administration tried, in all the disgusting, revolting, shameful ways it's been trying to change our culture for the last 2.5 years to say, well, we have to do this. There's a national security threat. It's a pandemic. It's misinformation. Misinformation harms people. We've talked so many times about them trying to create a slippery slope between words and violence. And even coining terms like disinformation, which is straight up a Marxist term. We have First Amendment protected speech, disinformation or no disinformation in this country. But they did that, and it was super illegal. And so this judge said, this is completely illegal. You may not do it. You may not communicate with them. And the Biden administration's response is this craven, well, we don't agree, with that. The American people will be harmed by what's on social media platforms. But it was a resounding decision, basically saying we are Americans. This is what America is. It is a country with a constitution, with a First Amendment, and the First Amendment protects the rights of all these millions of people to not be censored by the federal government. And the other thing that I love about this judge, it's so good, is this quote, the federal government cannot be trusted to protect Americans' rights, which is precisely why our founders enshrined the First Amendment into the Constitution. This is Attorney General Bailey tweeting. And that's exactly right. How can we forget history? The federal government, the reason to have a First Amendment is to protect Americans from the federal government censoring their speech. In Britain in the 1760s and 70s and 80s, they were censoring Tom Paine. They were imprisoning people for subversion. They were, arresting people for their opinions. That's why our founders created a different society here in which people had the right to say anything, and they were protected from by censorship from the federal government, who never has the real interests of citizens at heart when it comes to citizens expressing themselves freely.
Dr. Wolf, I want to go through, I want to hold you through the break if you wouldn't mind for a few minutes. I know you got to bounce, but we're going to take a break here. I want to hold you through it because I want to just, because people say, well, First Amendment, I'm not really into free speech. This is about control. What happened here is that the Biden regime worked with the FBI, the DOJ, others, and then worked with these quote unquote independent corporations, which are really not, because they're all part of the administrative state,
Right.
to say these people are dissidents. These people are not part of the narrative. They must be shut down. This is one of the most blatant attempts of authoritarian control in the history of this republic.
That's right.
This is why I'm sure the judge waited till the 4th of July to put it out to make sure that he had the big emphasis here. But this is a massive ruling. And what it gets to is exactly the fight that we've got on right now, and why you have prominent people like Dr. Marion Grossman, Dr. Naomi Wolf, Dr. Robert Malone, all these great doctors that were all part of the system. The Barrington Accords, all leading factors, Harvey Risch, all the top leaders in their categories and their sectors who had given their careers to the system, that said, hang on. This is not what my professional training shows me. This is not what the oath I took to defend either the Constitution or the Hippocratic Oath. This doesn't do it. And all of a sudden, they're the bad guys. They're the ones that you got to keep an eye on for. That is authoritarianism, and it's here in the United States, and right. That's what this fight's about. Short commercial break. Dr. Wolf will return after, and Phillip Patrick next.
Bannon.
Welcome back. Dr. Wolf, and I know you got to bounce. I thank you for coming off of the injured reserve list, as we say in baseball, back to the starting lineup. And I realize you still got a ways to go. But before I go to Phillip Patrick, I just want to make sure, because a lot of times people, even when I was partners with Andrew Breitbart when I first knew him, I said, I'm not really a First Amendment guy. That you guys and Dershowitz, those guys are on it. That's a constitutional thing. You know, I'm into geopolitics or finance and important stuff. But that's not what this is about. This is about, in the modern era of information and information warfare, this is about control. The closest this nation has ever gotten to a totalitarian, authoritarian model like the CCP has happened over the last couple of years. Now, it's been building for decades and decades, but really came to light beginning with the pandemics. The reason we shifted this show from impeachment to pandemic on the 20th of January of 2020, when I had people in the mainstream media and I go, what are you talking about? The show's on fire, impeachment. And now you're talking about some cold that's coming from China. I go, no, I think it's going to be a little bigger than that. Remember the Bill Maher show invited me out there and then he wouldn't even let me talk about it. He said, no, we can't talk about this. I said, okay. But this has been as scary as possible. And you don't need to take it from Steve Bannon or Naomi Wolf. Just read a federal judge's opinion from the bench. One more time, I just want, before you punch out, because obviously you're back and we're going to have you back on. But this is dealing with this regime and institutions of the FBI, of DOJ, of Homeland Security, which has this whole misinformation group working hand in glove with the biggest corporations in the world on social media that are really they've really they've merged into one entity, this administrative state. Dr. Naomi Wolf.
People really have to look at what always happens with incipient fascism and what happened with this disinformation effort of these powerful agencies putting pressure on Facebook and Twitter, who all were in turn invested in these vaccines and in lockdowns. And as I pointed out in my book, 23% net revenue boosted by everyone being locked down and forced onto digital platforms. Look what they started with. They start with don't question Wuhan, don't question masking, don't question lockdowns. And then there's always a migration in every totalitarian shift. More and more and more gets sucked into the vortex because the state doesn't want citizens to talk about anything the state doesn't want citizens to talk about. So then it became don't question trans operations for teenagers. Then it became don't question Ukraine. Don't question election fraud. Don't question Hunter Biden's laptop. Well, I've worked behind the scenes with a vice president and a president, and I've been a White House spouse. Any administration of any party, given the choice, will censor the points of view of the opposition if they can. And one of the most interesting things this judge said is that all of the points of view that were censored happened to be conservative, which, as he put it, is very telling. But once you give any government that power, that's it. It's over, because they will censor their opponents, and they will censor them to the point that, and they'll criminalize speech to the point that if someone even supports the other side, then they can be kind of hauled off to prison. That's the slippery slope. It happens super fast. And you're absolutely right that this was the biggest bid to create a censorship regime completely of a piece with Stalinist and communist Chinese censorship regimes, Nazi censorship regimes, going back to the beginning of the 20th century, and all of the great fascistic movements of the 20th century completely aligned with that kind of censorship, ramped up on steroids, of course, by technology.
Where do people go now? I want to make sure they get the basic core document that's leading to going on offense, the letters, become part of it. If you're sitting there and we're trying to inspire you in this month of, this is the pride in our country, this is the pride in Old Glory, this is the pride of a concept called liberty, of what 13 or 14 generations has bequeathed to us, and we're not going down without a fight. Right. Where do they go if they want to join and become part of this work effort, and to find out more about what you're doing, Naomi?
Yeah, well, we really need everyone's help now at dailyclout.io. The fight has ramped up, the expenses have ramped up, and as always, we need members and we need donors. Every bit helps, and we're going to keep pushing with these legal battles on two fronts until we bring these people to justice for what they've done.
Dr. Naomi Wolf, with social media, where do people get you? Still, that you're not currently banned?
Thank you. Fewer and fewer. Dr. Naomi Wolf on Substack. Dailyclout.io is where our news and opinion is, as well as Bill Cam, where you can see any state or federal bill. And I'm Naomi R. Wolf on Getter, Naomi R. Wolf on Twitter, and those are my main platforms.
Living proof that prayers work.
It's true.
Dr. Wolf, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hope you're getting better.
Thank you.
Thanks. Phillip Patrick, just like the federal judges, what he's described, and I want everybody to read the opinion. We'll make sure it's up on our newsletter. We'll make sure everybody gets it. But both Foreign Policy magazine and of course the great guys over at Zero Hedge have put up this issues about gold and issues about what's going on in this Durban situation. In fact, Foreign Policy is another one like Foreign Affairs. These are two of the monthly Bibles of the foreign policy community. They have massive websites, have come out and said, hey, guess what? In Durban, in August, the BRICS are going to meet, and they're talking about a basket of alternative currency. We don't know currently what they're doing. Gold may have a role in it, but this is big, and some people better start paying attention. We've been doing it for a while. We're on the road to Durban. Then you saw this amazing chart in Zero Hedge that showed how the price of gold tracks to, wait for it, the debt of the United States of America. Phillip Patrick, where do we stand? I think we got 45 days to go to Durban. Where do we stand, brother?
Yeah, it's moving. So August 22nd is the big date. We've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're meeting in Durban, and they're planning a major announcement. As you said, the expectation is they're going to launch a common currency, and the suggestion is it's going to be backed by commodities, most likely backed by gold, which quite frankly makes a lot of sense, right? It's a fast track to universal acceptance as a store of value. These nations, they don't have the best track records for stability, nor do their currencies. So there's an obvious benefit in tying any new currency to a historic store of value. And of course, gold is that. As we know, India, Russia, China have recently been significantly adding to their national gold reserves. And this is a big big problem, right? I think the biggest mistake we can make now as individuals is to not take this news seriously. It is significant. We have to remember these nations, the BRICS nations, now have a larger GDP combined than the G7. They are bigger than us now. They make up 40% of the Earth's population. They comprise 30% of the Earth's dry surface and natural resources. 50% of the world's wheat and rice production. 15% of the world's gold reserves. And they're two of the top three nuclear superpowers. Now, this movement is gathering steam. 13 other nations have officially now applied for membership, including, concerningly, Saudi Arabia. And we've got another 6 other nations informally asking to join this new coalition. So I think what's happening is that there is a global realignment occurring right now. Nations around the world, I think, are asking themselves, are they more aligned with the G7 or the BRICS nations? So this is a major event.
Hang on, but this is a huge event, and now it's being. I just want to make sure, and I'll get the foreign policy article up on Getter, and I'll get the Zero Hedge already put up. Also, the Shanghai Coordinating Organization, that's the alternative to the G7, G20, is meeting. They're meeting kind of telephonically or by Zoom. Modi, who's our guy, Modi is cheering it because he's sitting there going, I got to cover my bet. I want people to understand one thing. And the CCP and these totalitarian dictatorships hate the liberty of the American people. But in this regard, this was a choice we forced them into. And here's why. That's why the Zero Hedge story is so important, because it gets back to when we came off of the gold standard with Nixon, and it just traces the price of gold to a random event. That would be the increase in the debt of the United States of America. Quite simply, by being the prime reserve currency and kind of forcing that, being able to finance our own irresponsibility of our elites off of their back, their purchasing power is dropping, just like your purchasing power is dropping. I think, Phillip, it's 15% in the last couple of years. These people have enough guys that went to Harvard Business School, that went to Sloan at MIT. They can work an HP12C calculator, and they can do net present value and discounted cash flow, everything like that. And they're sitting there going, hang on for a second. We have the commodities. They have this thing called a Federal Reserve note, and they're not going to stop. This is why McCarthy's crime is so egregious. They're saying, hey, these are supposed to be these guys called conservatives, and this is all these big talkers like Bannon and all these guys, the MAGA guys. They're supposed to be in charge of the House. They just gave this guy ability. Once they see that, they go, this is madness. The West is engaged in financial, economic, and cultural and civilizational suicide, and we're not going to be a part of it. In fact, the enemies in that camp, the CCP and others, are sitting there going, hey, now we got a methodology to do it. We have brought this on ourselves, but, and this is why I'm so proud to be in partnership with Birch Gold. Hey, if the nations of the world are doing this, if the central banks of the world are doing this, now is the time to sit there and go, you know what, maybe I ought to immerse myself in this situation. If these guys are finally saying, okay, let me look around the world and I look for a store of value or a hedge against insanity for 5,000 years, what has that been? Gold. Okay. And remember, I didn't start this. I wasn't a Ron Paul gold guy. I got brought to this simply for the thing of the prime reserve currency to go, this is now suicidal, what's happened over the last couple of years, particularly as personified by what happened in the pandemic. Phillip, you don't have to be a gold bug. You don't have to be one of these guys who have argued for gold forever. Turns out they were right, but you don't have to be part of the Ron Paul, as brilliant as he was. Yeah, he's just a crank, wants to take us back to this, put us back to the 11th century. Just look at the guys working for the BRICS that work for the Saudis, the India. They're all at Harvard. They're all at Sloan. They're all at Stanford. They're all at the University of Chicago. They're all the best business schools in the world. They all work on Wall Street. They're all hedge fund guys. One thing they can do is mathematics, okay? And they've looked here and said, maybe we should come up with an alternative. Phillip Patrick.
You couldn't be more right. And it's happening around us. Listen, the share of global foreign exchange for the dollar hit a 25-year low, according to the IMF, back in 2021. It's down another 9% since then. So think of foreign exchange reserves like a country's bank account. What we're seeing around the world, nations increasingly uninterested in holding dollars. And as you rightly point out, this didn't start in 2021 or with the pandemic. It started back in 1971 when Nixon took essentially us off the gold standard. He told world central banks they could no longer swap their dollars for gold. And guess what their response was? Our allies at the time were concerned. They thought, without a gold standard, what would prevent the US from printing as many dollars as they wanted? Now, Nixon's Treasury Secretary at the time was a guy called John Connolly, and he had a very memorable response. He said, listen, the dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. And since then, inflation has really been the number one export for the US. The problem is, with other nations around the world distancing from the dollar, it's going to start to become our problem. And like you said, you know, you can't really blame these nations. Watching the fiscal irresponsibility of this administration, watching even the Republicans who you said should be pushing for some conservatism fiscally, they're not doing it. These nations around the world, I think, are waking up and they are seeking an alternative. You tie in the weaponization of the dollar, how Biden used it against Russia, I think a big mistake. Elon Musk had a very good quote. He said, listen, if you weaponize currency too many times, nations around the world will just stop using it. And that's what's happening now, and we have to keep it.
Let me jump in here. That's a brilliant assessment. I'm the biggest, in fact, I'm banned, I'm censured, I'm sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. Why? I was the biggest advocate in the Rogan, Josh Rogan in the book lays it out, A Chaos Under Heaven, for using, going to full economic warfare against the Chinese Communist Party. I want to use the dollar. I want to use reserves. I want to use the SWIFT system. But as I advocate at the time, you have one bullet in the chamber. It's a titanium kryptonite bullet, but you can use it once. You have to use it against an existential threat. If you start doing this with everybody, the next thing you know, they're going to be moving off of this. This is what's so important about the Ukrainian war. At the beginning of it, we did what Morgenthau and those guys didn't even do against the Nazis. Morgenthau and FDI, they never tried to take down the central bank. They never tried to destroy their currency. They didn't even try to get the Swiss to cut them off, right? We went after the central bank of Russia to destroy the ruble, and Putin had a revelation. Maybe I make it back by gold and I'll bail myself out. The nations of the world, that's what they're saying. Geopolitically, first we have a financial crisis, then geopolitically they said they go, hang on. They got the SWIFT system. They got the dollar, and they're going to seize our reserves. We seize the reserves of the Russians. Guys sitting there going, hey, let me think about this. Bail out of the dollar's reserve. Get all our reserves out. That's why things dropping. Am I not correct, Philip Patrick?
It's exactly right. We shot the wrong guy. And if you watch the Chinese at the time, that was the most telling point, right? That was the most telling thing. China was circling Taiwan in the South China Sea. Everyone thought invasion was imminent. They watched what we did to the Russians and immediately realized, had they saved that bullet for us, they could have brought us to their knees, the Chinese, right? So what did they do? That was the catalyst for them to go out, start negotiating with the Saudis to push this BRICS alliance. We forced their hands. If they want to achieve their geopolitical aims, if they want Taiwan, they've got to end the dollar's dominance. So that's what they're pushing for full force right now. We forced their hands. It was a dumb move to use it against the Russians, and now we're paying the price. But the thing is, I say to people all the time, inflation, recession, these things are cyclical, will come back. You lose a grip on global reserve, you never get that back. And that is significant.
The English, the Spanish, you just look throughout history. Birchgold.com/Bannon. We have all the information now about the Durban Accords. One of the most important meetings in the history of the 21st century. Too. What happened in China and the CCP with One Belt, One Road in the May of 2019, and then what is going to happen in Durban in August of 2022, which are inextricably linked, are going to be two of the most important moments of the 21st century, and it will have a direct impact on you. This is just not about your country. This is just not about your company. This is just not about your community. This is about you. So you got to go to Birch Gold right now /Bannon. We lay it all out for you. Plus, talk to Phillip Patrick and those guys. If the Stanford and Harvard MBAs working for the developing nations, from the developing nations working for them, if these guys in their HP-12Cs are saying, hey, boss, I think we got to get the central bank to buy as much gold as possible right now, that should be a heads up to you that you got to just immerse yourself in the information. Go to Phillip Patrick's team and say, hey, explain this to me. Then you can make your own decision, because now you're just not having gold bugs do it, because the world is forcing this. And this thing in Durban is going to be very, very important. We're going to cover it every day to make sure you guys are fully up to speed on it. Phillip, if people call or email you, what can they expect? Can you guys walk them through all the ins and outs of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Information is key. So anyone that goes birchgold.com/Bannon, they're going to get access to a free information kit, as well as the dollar reports that we've written with you. So access to a lot of good information. It'll get people up to speed. And, the best way to make a decision is from an informed perspective. So birchgold.com/Bannon, that's going to get them the information.
Phillip, thank you for coming on, and thank you for being part of this. I've just come up with the idea. I think I'm going to talk to the Birch Gold guys about it. Phillip Patrick, because he's he's an American citizen, but he's a Commonwealth member. I think we got to get Phillip Patrick to go cover Durban live. We got to have Phillip Patrick reporting live from Durban in August. So I'll bring that up with the team later. But Phillip, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. There's so much going on. Hey, Phillip, thanks, brother. There's so much going on, and we've got so little time to do it. We're going to be back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Remember, this is all of a piece. There's so much happening in the world today, but I want to tie it back to the 4th of July. We're just not going to celebrate the 4th of July, American independence and liberty and the fight for that just on one day and have a cookout and have fireworks and everything and all that. The whole month of July here in the War Room is going to be Pride Month. Pride in the United States of America, pride in our sovereignty, pride in us as the cradle of liberty. The cradle of liberty. Think about that for a second. The cradle of liberty. Pride in Old Glory, pride in the American flag, not in this debauchery, not in this perversion, none of it. This is true Pride Month. Pride in the United States of America and her citizens, and what they've accomplished for the world and what they are yet to accomplish in this cradle of liberty. And we are never backing down, and we are never, ever, ever, ever going to give up. Because as John Paul Jones said, we have not yet begun to fight. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we pick up right here. Make sure you tune in for the War Room. 4 hours every day of populist nationalism. We'll see you back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow in the War Room.